Hello student, myself Dr. Meena, and today's class topic is CSF circulation, cerebrospinal fluid circulation. CSF, cerebrospinal fluid circulation. Cerebrospinal fluid circulation means where it is formed, how it is formed, where it flows down or goes up, how it is circulated, and then it is get absorbed. This whole pathway is called CSF circulation. This is very important topic and a very basic topic in neuroanesthesia. Okay, I have drawn this imaginary diagram in a very simplified way, but it seems difficult to all of you, I think. So I will break this diagram step by step. I will tell you what the structures I have made, and I will tell you about the CSF pathway or circulations. Right. So the innermost layer, it is like blue in color. It is blue in color. That is our CNS. CNS includes brain and spinal cords. So this is we have two cerebral hemisphere. One is left, one is right. Okay, and this is interhemispheric fissure. This is one cerebral hemisphere, and this is other cerebral hemisphere. Okay, the cerebral hemisphere is connected to the bones by the midbrain. So here it is midbrain, right? And after midbrain, below midbrain, there is a bones, then there is a medulla oblongata, and then it is continuous as a spinal cord. So this is the blue color image which has been shown here. Okay, so this is two cerebral hemisphere, then midbrain, then bones, then medulla oblongata, and then spinal cord, and this is cerebral hemisphere. Clear it? Now before proceeding to the next step, you all should know about some nomenclature and some cavities, which is the cavities which is present in the brain as well as in the spinal cord. Okay, as I told you before, the CNS, it consists of two parts, brain and spinal cord. Okay, now I will draw some cavities, and I will tell you about some nomenclature, I mean the parts of the brain. Okay, then CNS, central nervous system. It includes two parts, brain and spinal cord. Okay, brain is divided into three parts. Forebrain, that is called prosencephalon, midbrain, it is called mesencephalon, and hindbrain, it is called rhombencephalon. Now forebrain, it is called prosencephalon. Then midbrain. What is midbrain? Midbrain is the part of brain which is connecting the cerebral hemisphere to the bones. This is the part. This is midbrain. So second part is midbrain, and third part is hindbrain. Hindbrain is also called rhombencephalon, and midbrain is called mesencephalon. Right. Now the prosencephalon or forebrain, it is divided into three parts. The cerebrum is called telencephalon. Second, the thalamus, and third is hypothalamus. You must have heard about these names, right? I will tell you later on when we will discuss about neuroanatomy. right? So for brain of prosencephalon, it is divided into three parts: cerebrum, the telencephalon, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Okay, then thalamus and hypothalamus, they are collectively called diencephalon. They are collectively called diencephalon. And the okay, the telencephalon is cerebral hemisphere. Cerebrum is called telencephalon, or there are two cerebral hemispheres, so both are collectively called telencephalon, right? And the thalamus, and below the thalamus there is hypothalamus, which is, we are not able to draw the hypothalamus. So below the thalamus there is hypothalamus, and thalamus and hypothalamus both are collectively called as diencephalon. Then hindbrain or rhombencephalon. Rhombencephalon include three parts. First part is pons. Second part is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. And third part is cerebellum. Right? These three combinedly they are called hindbrain or rhombencephalon. So this is pons, this is medulla oblongata, and on the front side there is pons and then medulla, but on the posterior side there is cerebellum. Okay, this is the 2D image, so we cannot see the cerebellum in the image, and I am not able to draw the cerebellum, right? So you just imagine that cerebellum is behind the pons and the medulla, right? Okay, I can draw a lateral diagram so that it will be clear to all of you that behind the pons and medulla there is cerebellum, right? And between these three structures there is a triangular cavity which is called fourth ventricle, right? So I will draw lateral view of the fourth ventricle or pons, medulla or cerebellum, right? Now pons, medulla oblongata and the spinal cord. We are, this is the image from the lateral side, right? So pons, medulla oblongata and spinal cord, right? And behind it there is cerebellum. So this leaf-like structure, this structure is called cerebellum. This is called cerebellum, right? And between them there is a cavity. This cavity is fourth ventricle. So there is on the anterior side there is pons, then medulla, and then spinal cord going down, and behind is cerebellum, and between the pons, medulla and cerebellum there is a cavity which is called fourth ventricle, right? Okay. Okay, now I will tell you about some cavities which is present in the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, this is 1 and 2 cerebral hemisphere. Within the cerebral hemisphere, one in each cerebral hemisphere there is cavity, and that is called lateral ventricle. The one lateral ventricle in the right cerebral hemisphere and one lateral ventricle in the left cerebral hemisphere. Okay, so cerebral hemisphere there is lateral ventricle. Okay, one in each cerebral hemisphere, that means two cavity. And I have already drawn this structure, this red color structure. This is actually a cavity, this red color structure, and this is lateral ventricle, LV. It is not lung, it is lateral ventricle. Okay, I am writing here lateral ventricle. So the lateral ventricle is fluid filled cavity which is filled with the CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, and it is situated in the cerebral hemisphere, and cerebral hemisphere is also called as telencephalon. So the cerebral hemisphere or lateral ventricle, so lateral ventricle is the cavity of telencephalon. So lateral ventricle, it is the cavity of telencephalon. So lateral ventricles are the cavities of telencephalon. Now moving to the next, the third ventricle. The third ventricle is a part of diencephalon. So the diencephalon. In the diencephalon, I already told you there is thalamus and hypothalamus. There are two thalami. Okay, there are T. T denotes thalami. Okay, this T denotes thalamus, which is a part of diencephalon, right? So between the thalamus, there is cavity. So this cavity, fluid-filled cavity, it is called third ventricle. So diencephalon, between the thalami, there is third ventricle, fluid-filled cavity, which is called third ventricle. It is also filled with the CSF, right? Now again, coming to the next, then we will find this red color structure. Okay, then we can see this red color structure, and what this blue line denotes, this is midbrain. So this tube-like structure, which, because as I already told you that midbrain connects cerebral hemisphere to bones, so this tube-like cavity is connecting the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. This is third ventricle and this is fourth ventricle. So this is called cerebral aqueduct. Okay, this is called cerebral aqueduct. This is also fluid filled cavity. This left ventricle, it is fluid filled cavity, CSF is present there. Then third ventricle, then this sort of cavity is called cerebral aqueduct. Okay, then again one cavity is more in the midbrain. So in midbrain or mesencephalon, the cavity of mesencephalon is called cerebral aqueduct. So the cavity of telencephalon is called lateral ventricle. The cavity of diencephalon is called third ventricle. The cavity of midbrain or mesencephalon is called cerebral aqueduct. And the fourth cavity, as you see, it is the fourth ventricle, and it is the cavity of hindbrain. That means rhombencephalon. It is fourth ventricle. The cavity of fourth ventricle or rhombencephalon is fourth ventricle, right? And all these cavities which is present in the brain, they are producing CSF, and also they give path to the CSF and they are filled with the CSF. So we are here in the fourth ventricle, which is CSF filled cavity. Now this fourth ventricle is continue as a spinal cord. Okay, so the cavity of spinal cord, it is called central canal. Okay, this fourth ventricle is continuing as a hollow structure, and this is called central canal of the spinal cord. So this cavity is called central canal of spinal cord. Okay, so this is also a cavity which is fluid filled. CSF is present over here. Okay, now okay, then central canal, it is the cavity of spinal cord. So there are multiple cavities In the central nervous system, lateral ventricle, third ventricle, cerebral aqueduct, fourth ventricle, and the central canal, which all are filled with the CSF. Okay. Now, moving to the next. Now we will discuss CSF circulation. Hope you understand till now. You are getting my point, what I want to teach you. Okay. Now I can name these structures. Okay. The blue structure is called cerebral hemisphere. 2 in number, right? Blue line. The green line, again, the midbrain. This is blue line, midbrain. It connects pons to cerebral hemisphere. Then this, pons. Then below that, medulla oblongata. This blue line. Okay. Then here it is spinal cord. Right. Cavities I already mentioned and I already told you. Then, okay, what next? Yes. Okay. We all know the whole of the CNS is covered with the pia mater. There are 3 meninges. Innermost is pia mater, mid is arachnoid mater, and the outermost is dura mater. So already I have drawn these meninges. This green line is pia mater, right? The black one is arachnoid mater. And the outermost layer, this red one is dura mater. Okay. And these 3 meninges are present whole of the CNS. It covers the brain, it covers the midbrain, it covers the pons, medulla, and whole of the spinal cord, right? And the arachnoid mater, below the arachnoid mater, there is a subarachnoid space where CSF is found. We all know this because during spinal anesthesia, we insert the spinal needle in the subarachnoid space, and then CSF will come out. Okay. And then we inject the drug. Okay. So I will tell you later. Okay. Now I will tell you about the CSF circulation from the production, then circulation, and then till the absorption, right? Okay. Then production. First I am taking production. Then CSF is produced in the cavities. Which cavities? 3 cavities. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and the fourth ventricle. Okay. Lateral ventricle, third ventricle between the thalami, and then the fourth ventricle. Okay. These 3 cavities are producing CSF. Which structure is producing CSF? Which structure is present in these cavity that is going to produce CSF? Okay. So this structure, the specialized structure, or we can say the specialized secretory units, that is called choroid plexus. You must be knowing choroid plexus. Okay. So here I will draw choroid plexus. What is choroid plexus? Choroid plexus are the bunch of vessels or the tuft of capillaries that is covered by pia mater and the ependymal cell. And these ependymal cells, they filter the plasma into the CSF. That's why the CSF is produced. Okay. So these are the tuft of vessels, the bunch of capillaries, choroid arteries. The capillaries is formed by choroid arteries and the veins. Then these vessels are covered by pia mater, and pia mater, there is outer layer of ependymal cell which cover the pia mater. So these are ependymal cells. These are ependymal cells that produce CSF. This green layer is pia matter which cover the capillaries, and these red lines, these are choroid capillaries. So this whole structure, they secrete CSF in the cavity. Okay. I think I have cleared your all queries regarding CSF production. Okay. Now I am coming to CSF circulation, right? So the CSF is produced by lateral ventricle. So the choroid plexus, which is present in the lateral ventricle, these are choroid plexus. They are present in the lateral ventricle, third ventricle, in the roof of the third ventricle, and in the roof of the fourth ventricle. They are CSF producing specialized secretory units. So they secrete the CSF, and then CSF is majority of the CSF is present in the lateral ventricles, one left and right lateral ventricles, and small amount is added to the main part of the CSF from the third ventricle and the fourth ventricle, right? So the CSF, the lateral ventricle, both the lateral ventricle is connected to the third ventricle by two foramina, that is called interventricular foramina or foramen monro. So here two foramina are present between lateral ventricle and the third ventricle. It is called foramen monro or interventricular foramina. So from via this foramina, the CSF is coming out into the third ventricle, and it exits the third ventricle. Via the cerebral aqueduct, which is present in the mesencephalon. So this aqueduct, it connects the third ventricle to fourth ventricle. Now the CSF is coming to the fourth ventricle, which is the cavity of hindbrain or rhomencephalon, and some choroid plexus are present on the roof of the fourth ventricle also. So some amount of CSF is also added to the majority of CSF, and then this whole CSF is coming down into the central canal of the spinal cord, right? Okay. Now till then what we got it, that the CSF is present in the cavity of CNS. There is no exit of the CSF. So there is a trick, because in fourth ventricle there are three apertures. These apertures, they act as a exit point for the CSF, and from these exit point, the CSF coming out from the from the whole cavity of the CNS into the subarachnoid space. Okay. So in fourth ventricle there are three foramina. Two on the lateral side and one on the posterior median side. Means two on the lateral side and one on the posterior median side, right? So these foramina, the lateral foramina, lateral means lashka. So these two foramina, the lateral foramina are two in number, that is called foramen lashka, and the posterior median foramina, it is called foramen Magendii. You can remember M for median and L for lateral. Lateral aperture is called Lashka and median aperture is called Magendii. Okay, then CSF, which is present in the fourth ventricle going down into the central canal, it exits from these foramina. Okay, they exits from these foramina, and the foramen lashka, they drain into the cerebellopontine cistern, while the foramen Magendii, they drain into the cerebellomedullary cistern. Okay. Foramen lashka, they drain into the cerebellopontine cistern. What is cistern? Cisterns are dilated subarachnoid space, and Magendii, it drain into the cerebellum, because behind there is cerebellomedullary cistern. Cisterns are dilated subarachnoid space. So now from now onwards, CSF is coming into the subarachnoid space. We already drawn this black line is arachnoid matter, and below the arachnoid matter there is subarachnoid space. So this CSF is coming to the subarachnoid space. Okay, some is going up and some is going down, because the subarachnoid space is a continuous space. Okay, some is going down. This is subarachnoid space of spinal cord. So this is the side subarachnoid space, subarachnoid space of spinal cord, where we inject a drug during spinal anesthesia, right? So it is filled with the CSF. Now some of the CSF going up underneath the, and it it goes underneath the brain surface, and then it goes around the brain surface, and then it goes on the top of the cerebrum. So it is going up underneath the brain surface. This is underneath the brain surface, subarachnoid space, then going around the brain. This is around the subarachnoid space of the brain, and then going up into the subarachnoid space. Okay, hope you understand this. Now what is next? What about the absorption of the CSF? I have already told you production, then I have told you about the circulation, then the CSF is reached to the on the top of the brain in the subarachnoid space. Now this black line is arachnoid matter, so, and this red line is dura matter. This red line I have told you, this is dura matter. So on the top of the brain, the dura matter is a meninges. It has two lining, one which is attached to the brain, that is called meningeal surface of the dura matter, meningeal layer of the dura matter, and other is fibrous layer, which is periosteal layer, which is attached to the skull. So there is a space on the top of the brain. These two layers of dura matter, they get separated and they form a triangular space. They form a triangular space on the top of the brain. This is the triangular space which is formed by the dura matter. Okay, and this contain venous sinuses, Okay, I will draw venous sinus with the blue one. Okay, this contain venous sinus, and this venous sinus is called, because it is present superiorly, so it is called superior sagittal venous sinus. Okay, so all CSF ultimately absorb into the superior sagittal venous sinus, and then it came into the blood. Okay, now what about arachnoid matter? Okay, so this arachnoid matter, they actually intrude into the dura matter. They breach the dura matter and they go inside the venous sinuses after breaching the meningeal layer of the dura matter. So they form finger-like projection. Okay, they like finger-like projection in the triangular space, and these finger-like projection of arachnoid matter, these are called arachnoid granulation. Okay, these are called arachnoid granulation. So when we see macroscopically, okay, if we see macroscopically, these finger-like projection of arachnoid matter are called arachnoid granulations. But when we see microscopically, then these are called arachnoid villi. Okay, so ultimately CSF is getting absorbed into the superior sagittal venous sinuses, and then it come into the blood. So this is all about the CSF production, circulation, and the absorption of CSF, and I hope you like it, and thank you so much. And in next class I will tell you about the CSF and hydrocephalus. Thank you so much.